In nearly every ancient culture which placed a value on the pursuit of higher states of consciousness, the symbolic use of the snake to represent various channels and forces of higher, subtle or spiritual energy is a universal tradition. The location of the rising cobra at the exact site of the third eye reinforces the special emphasis placed on this same site by the pylons and connects this symbolism to the rich heritage and pan-cultural associations it carries. The mysteries of the Temple of Man remain beyond our full grasp despite many tantalizing insights. New research continues to produce new revelations. Our realization that the very gateway pylon serves as a metaphor for human consciousness is just the most recent development. When will we understand how the ancient Egyptians could have drawn microscopic cells? Or was the proximity of a graphic depiction of male sexuality and a lifelike sperm cell just a wild coincidence? What is the meaning of a depiction of an immaculate conception in the year 1300 BC? The sophisticated levels of artistic, scientific and spiritual knowledge that were required for the design and construction of the Temple of Luxor defy easy explanation, and so were long ignored by traditional Egyptology. Recent revelations show that the temple was a complex sacred teaching designed to be studied over time. It was a magical instrument intended to demonstrate and even facilitate the devoted student's connection to a conscious universe. For those who could read the ancient language of the temple, it provided a map of that universe as reflected in humanity. Today, our resurgent understanding of the temple's symbolic riddles allows us to see that the temple's architecture remains vital and alive. By continuing our research, we maintain a connection to a civilization that came before. We keep open a passageway into the life of ancient Egypt.
The physical body of the pharaoh was rendered timeless, perhaps turned into an open gate, or perhaps a type of anchor. It was heavily supplied with all manner of spells, amulets, talismans, and other forms of magical protection. The strange practice of mummification still holds many mysteries. Why were some organs carefully preserved while the brain was scooped out and discarded? An unexpected insight into this question can be found in the work of Dr. Rick Strassman. His pioneering work has raised some very important questions about the pineal gland and its interaction with a strange hallucinogenic chemical known as DMT. Could the interaction of these two components be the seat of consciousness? Could it in fact be the gate through which we enter and leave each new life?
In terms of how the study started, I was interested in seeing if I could determine a biological basis of mystical states. That was probably how things started in the first place. And I was quite impressed with some of the commonalities that seemed to occur between spontaneously occurring mystical states, such as those that occurred with meditation and with spiritual practices, and even those described from near-death experiences. Quite a few of those descriptions seem quite comparable to descriptions of people on large doses of psychedelic drugs. And so I started to think about the possibility of some kind of compound in the brain with psychedelic properties that could be underlying some of these spontaneous experiences. I began becoming interested in the pineal gland as a possible source of some kind of psychedelic chemical in the brain. It's an extremely mysterious organ. It's quite small. There seemed to be some kind of a kind of visual correspondence with light and with color in the pineal. And also it has quite a long history in the context of the mystical literature. It's been described as the third eye and as the crown chakra, those kinds of things. And it's spoken of as being activated when people attain quite high mystical states. And so one of the interesting aspects of pineal development also is that it appears in the human embryo at around 49 days of gestation. And 49 days is also the time that the Tibetans believe is required for one soul to incarnate onto the next. So that was a pretty interesting, coincidence. At the time of the differentiation of the fetus into either male or female, that also occurs at that 49-day period. And so I was struck with this interesting kind of temporal, correspondence. And so as time went on, I started, looking into some of the chemistry of the pineal gland. And it seemed as if it was capable of making a compound called DMT. DMT stands for dimethyltryptamine. It's like a chemical cousin of serotonin. And it's quite a profound hallucinogenic type of chemical. It seemed as if the pineal contained all of the precursors and all the enzymes and all of the building blocks that would be required to make DMT. So I started speculating about perhaps there was DMT released in the pineal gland and stimulating the brain under extraordinary states, either through spontaneous mystical states, the time of death, or at times close to death. And also I started speculating that perhaps it was stimulated at the time of birth as well. The pineal gland is extremely well protected from stress, but you can stress the pineal gland if the stress is great enough. Pineal's protective mechanism can be overridden. And so obviously the most stressful time in a person's life is at the time of death. The stress hormones like adrenaline and endorphins are at extraordinarily high levels at the time of death. And so that could, possibly stimulate the formation and the release of DMT from the pineal gland at that time. And so you can, conceive of an individual's consciousness at the time of death being exposed to this big flash of DMT. And so the last thing that one is conscious of in the body is the release of this huge amount of this incredible psychedelic compound.
During his testing, Strassman discovered that abnormal levels of the chemical DMT triggered states of consciousness that closely paralleled common experiences of an afterlife.
Well, that's true. Almost everybody experienced an extremely profound and extremely unmistakable separation of their body and their consciousness from each other.
DMT at higher levels acted as a type of catalyst for near-death experiences. In fact, it seemed to actually induce the machinery of the afterlife to swing into motion.
I suppose one of the most unexpected aspects of the study's results was the frequency with which people described a kind of contact with these intelligent kinds of entities that were conscious of them and interacted with the volunteers in this quite strange space.